Hi everyone, welcome to today's LinkedIn Live session. I'm Trishla and I'm really excited to be hosting this conversation. This session is going to be a little different. It's not like a masterclass nor like a framework heavy session. These are going to be real, honest conversations about sales, career, and lessons that actually going to be staying with you. So, why I'm really excited is because we have Arnold from today. Arnold has closed deals across India, Southeast Asia, and the US, which means he brings a truly global experience on sales, building relationships, and a buying behavior that changes across markets. So, a very warm welcome, Arnold. Really glad to have you here. Before we jump in, Arnold, would like to hear from you. If you could give us a quick snapshot of your journey.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Trishla, for hosting this session. Really excited to be here this morning. Good evening to everybody in India who is joining also. I'm Arnold Britto. I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia. I've lived in the US for the last, I would say, about 26, 27 years now. And my sales career has kind of traversed across, as you rightly put it, across continents. I started my career in India, did a little bit of work in Southeast Asia, dabbled a little bit with the Middle East, and found myself to the United States sometime in the late 90s. Since here, I've been in tech sales all my life, and currently I work for a Google partner called Onyx in the cloud data and AI space. Really, again, excited to be here this morning and share my experiences with the sales function. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining in, Arnold. I mean, we do understand you must be having a very busy schedule, so we do appreciate that you joined in. So let's just quickly begin into the session. So the first question is something that I personally really love, and being in sales for the past 4 years now. These are going to be stories from the field. So if you could let us and tell the audience, something about a deal that really taught you something, and it still holds true today.
Uh, yeah, that's a good question. I think the deal that comes to my mind, from the past, I mean, I've closed a lot of deals, but the deals that comes to my mind, which have stayed with me, are the deals basically where I have lost actually, not won.
Okay.
So here's a story of a deal, basically, which I kind of worked on for about, I would say, about 10 to 11 months. It was an existing account and, done everything right, right? Map the organization, build pipeline as usual, feeling very excited, got the right people within our company to kind of showcase what we were all about, and was really excited, right? Went through QBRs at that same existing customers, the quarterly business reviews that you have. Everything was hunky dory, right? Until I got a call, and in 15 minutes, they just told me. I mean, there was no negotiation or anything like that, right? They just told me, "Hey, we are going in a different direction," and I was just left stunned, right? Because I thought I would absolutely win that deal. I was like crushing it within that particular account.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when, reality hit me and that stayed with me, saying, you can do everything yet lose deals, right? And a very important lesson that I learned from that, Trisha, was, don't tie your identity to these outcomes, right? Because the minute you do that, it's chaos. So that's one lesson that I learned, and it has kind of stayed with me. No matter what deals I win or lose, I do not tie the outcome to my identity, right, as a salesperson. So that is what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Yeah. So Anil, I mean, it holds true, but I feel it's very difficult to sort of implement because how the deals go, that's how our mood also sort of goes up and down. I mean, if we get a deal in, then that day goes really, really good, and the moment we lose or a deal slips, we know that we're going to crash. So it's difficult to hold, but I'm sure with experience, people learn to have balance their emotions. But yeah, it is sort of directly proportional to how we feel that day.
No, absolutely. And for people who are on the call and who might probably listen to this recording later, I think it is very important for individuals, especially individuals looking at, creating like a career in sales, business development, to have that thought process, right, and mindset.
Yeah,
Because just like any human being, human psychology, right, we all want to win all the time. It doesn't happen.
true. So true. So moving on to the next question, Arnold. So you've sold across various different markets. And this is where it actually gets interesting. You've sold deals in India, Southeast Asia, and America. So what works in one place that completely fails in another?
That's a good question. Uh, I would say, going into a particular deal with a single playbook and applying it to any region, any deal does not work. It
Hmm.
has like spectacularly failed for me, right?
Hmm.
I'll give you an example, right? Like in US, speed, kind of signals, competence. Like, hey, this guy is like very responsive, very fast. He must be really good, right? The company might be really good. In Southeast Asia, it's absolutely different, right? Like I've worked in places like Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines in the early part of my career. And I realized that, speed without context will kind of signal disrespect for those people, right?
Hmm.
So what happens in one region does not necessarily happen in the third region. I have worked with a lot of GSIs, right? Especially GSIs that, had large bases in India. And these days, I also work with companies that have these global competency centers or GCCs, as
Yeah.
they are called, in India, right? In India, you can build a relationship very fast, but each
Hmm.
of this trust that comes in those relationships, they are tested over a period of time, right? So each region is different. But what works, I think, globally, what travels well in my thought process is clarity of thought, right? Like having the right clear message, attention to detail, being ruthless in prioritization of details. That kind of works very well, right? And what does not work well is like our own assumption of the pace of the deal. As salespeople, we are like very, very excited. We want to close deals every quarter, every month, whatever be the case, right? But I think it is important to understand that doesn't work well. So the assumption of the pace is important. Also, our own assumptions of the hierarchy within the organization. We feel X, Y, or Z would help us with the deal. That tends to not happen most of the time. So you have like economic buyers, you have technical buyers, you have influencers. Anybody can either make or break the deal.
Hmm.
And finally, I think what does not work well is our assumptions around communication styles. So
Okay.
that these I feel do not work well, right? But so that is how I would like to construct that particular answer.
No, very well said, Arnold. I think what I take back is I think understanding the pace of the deal, because we are sort of always in a hurry, but we need to realize when we need to give time to the customer as well. And secondly, what you mentioned was we need to gauge who's going to be the champion for us in the deal. I think that person plays a very critical role in bridging between the organization and the client. So it's important to identify who's going to be that person and who's going to make us help us crack that deal for us.
There is one more thing I wanted to add. While you were talking
Yeah.
through these statements, I just realized that, it is also important to, when you enter any room as a salesperson or a business development person, it's very important to like read the room. And here is where, I like to dabble with this whole soccer mindset, right? Of having a midfielder's mindset. I used to play in a midfield position on a
Okay.
soccer pitch, right?
Okay.
So that's the best position to see the play, like to see gaps in the field. You can pass the ball to your, colleagues who can then score the goal. Same thing
Yeah.
in the business environment, right? Like you need to enter each room with like curiosity rather than having a pitch deck. and
Mm-hmm.
then feel the pulse of the room, and then create that pitch based on all the capabilities you have.
Hmm.
uh, then it all comes together, like it's all orchestrated very well, right? But if you do not have curiosity, you don't want to understand the pulse of the room, whether you're pitching in Asia or you're pitching in the US, then it is chaos. So that is what I wanted to add.
No, point well taken, Arnold. I think a couple of things that you mentioned, I think they go. It's all same across, irrespective of the region that we are working in. I think few things that we can actually take back can be applied to all the regions, and it's not going to be based on where we are working or which country we're working in.
Right.
So the last question, probably my favorite. So if you could tell your 30-year-old self, one thing about building a career in sales, what would that be?
I, oh, that's a good question actually, because at 30, if I can recollect, uh, it was all about momentum, right? Like I wanted like to increase pipeline. I wanted to like increase movement of the deals. But most of the time these movements are not progress. I mean, in
Okay.
our minds it is, but relationships are the key, right? Like I realized very quickly that these relationships kind of compound, the transactions do not.
Mhm.
So, I started focusing more on kind of building trust, within the particular relationship, because that most of the time, I would say 8 out of 10 times would go on to help me within that particular account or these relationship. Even when I lost deals, they would go elsewhere and they would bring me into the relationship for the other account, because I had spent so much time building that trust, right? So I think those are the critical elements for any 30-year-old or my older self. I would say focus on, building that relationship and trust, because that is very important, as you progress, whether you win or lose the deal. Secondly, is which I just said in the previous segment, where you should have that curiosity, be able to kind of read the room, and then pitch. So those would be a few of the top things I would say I would tell my 30-year-old self, I guess.
Got it, Arnold. Understood, Arnold. So, of course, read a lot of books and seen a lot of content online. A lot of sales leaders definitely focus and emphasize a lot on building trust and focusing on the relationship that you have with the client. But it's still, we say that it's slightly subjective. So if you could deep dive more onto it as to how, if you could just tell the audience as to your ways, if you could, share a couple of your experiences of how you are able to drive it with your clients.
Well, I try to stay authentic in the sales process, Trishla. So I'm not your quintessential flamboyant sales guy. Also, the sales that I do is primarily technical sales. So, you got to have like that substance as well as the form. Sales people, when they think about it, the general perception is sales guys are liars, right?
Yeah.
But having said that, not all sales guys are liars. I mean, in a technical sale you got to kind of maintain the balance, I would say, between selling and being authentic. So I always start with like being authentic, and I then go on to build the relationship, the usual wine and dine, and bring the right set of folks within the account. They feel that here is a person who is a problem solver, who we can treat as a trusted advisor or as an extended arm of our team, right? So those are the parameters I kind of try to focus on. I keep it very simple.
Mhm.
I bring the right people in, and I always focus on the relationship and trust building mechanisms.
Got it. I think this is going to be something very useful for the audience, and they definitely would want to apply the same in their work as well. So now, Arnold, I would like to open this forum for everyone to join us. So we can have the audience to drop in few questions that you'd like to ask Arnold in the chat section. It could be about sales, building a career in it, or if you're in between, trying to navigate transitions, we'll pick up few questions and then we'll have Arnold answer them as well. So if you could just drop in the chat box and then I'll pick it up. Sure, Anish, you can go ahead and ask.
Hello, sir. My name is Anish, and currently I am pursuing my MBA from India. So, sir, I am a fresher and I want to build my career around tech sales. So, actually, I'm confused that where should I start from? Can you just guide me?
Sure, that's a good question, Anish. I think that's pretty practical questions. You're trying to look at a sales career. I would say, the best place to start would be do some secondary research, which you would as a part of an MBA student. So look at the market in which you are or where you are seeking a job, I guess, in the future, and try and like maybe download like the top 20 companies that you would ideally like to focus your energies on, right? And send them a possibility of a chat with those folks in the company. So it could be LinkedIn, it could be personal relationships that you might have through friends and family. I mean, I think start from that particular perspective. Secondly, I mean, if you're looking at a sales career, then it is important to talk to at least 5 to 10 sales folks and see how their journey has kind of transpired, right? Like what are some like critical elements of the sales function, and see if you can actually resonate with it or if you feel comfortable with that whole process, because sales is not for everybody. It's a particular skill set. You need to be comfortable with people. You need to be like, some people are very good at desk jobs, right? Some people are very good with people, some people are very good with words. So sales is not for everybody, but at the same time, if you're truly passionate about this particular career, then I think talking to like a bunch of salespeople, understanding their journeys, talking to friends and families, and getting access to these companies that you want to work as a salesperson. I think those are your starting steps.
Thanks, Arnold. So we have few questions in the
Mhm.
chat as well. Um, so we have a question from Yash, who's asking that how does one transition from a pre-sales technical solutions role to a BDR or an AE role in tech?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, Yash, if you are listening, I mean, it's like pre-sales is like the heart of any sales process, right? Like, I think that's the right foundational step. I personally didn't go through the pre-sale step. I joined in as a business development executive, and then because I work with these GSIs, I used to have access to an inside sales or a pre-sales team, and I got a chance to kind of work through that particular segment, right, with a bunch of very talented people, right, in my career. So I think you are in the right place if you're looking for a BDR or a sales career, because you need to have those foundational elements. You need to have understanding of how you pitch. When I say a pitch, basically an elevator pitch, because when you are on these cold calls and telephones and trying to get meetings from a pre-sales perspective, you just have finite amount of time, right? So I think you have understood that particular process. Making a transition into sales will not be a problematic area. Obviously, having said that, you need to kind of build up on skills like be more curious, understand the capabilities better, understand who you're going to pitch, what level you are pitching, are they the right points of contacts for you. I mean, there are a lot of other elements which you'll have to keep in your repertoire, right, to be that best sales guy. But yeah, I think you're on the right path. I think from pre-sales to sales is a much more easier transition.
So next question we have with Gunjan, and I also personally face this a lot. How do you handle the pressure of target and sales?
That's a very good question, right? That's a question that every salesperson is enamored with. Uh, I'll tell you, I'll break it down into two or three parts, right? Like in the first phase of my career, I used to be, like I said, like earlier, right? It was all about momentum, and I wanted to like build pipeline, meet targets, do all of that stuff, and a lot of that is connected to financial incentives and various other compensation plans, right? Accordingly, so you like just enamored as a salesperson, and you do anything and everything, right? But even after doing the best of the things, I realized that there are a lot of variants which may not be in your favor, right? Like the odds are always stacked against you in a sales deal. And most likely cases would be, one in four deals you will win. And if you do one in four, I think that's a darn good number, right? Like people will say, hey, you need to do at least two or three out of four, right? But I think even one in four is a darn good number. These days, I look at targets very differently, right? Like for me, targets are nothing more than noise, right, in the system. I kind of focus myself on doing the right stuff, like building the relationships with the customer or the prospect, and trying to be like a trusted advisor, trying to understand the problem at hand and then solve the problem like I'm the customer, right? And get the right folks in, and try to make it a deal, and try to also think outside the box. If your target is like $1 million, for example, right? Think outside the box, because you need at least a 3x pipeline. So think that you're creating a deal of a 3 million or a $5 million, and then you will definitely hit your 1 million, right? Like you got to think outside the box. So these days I try to kind of think differently than how I used to think in the early part of my career. So yeah, I hope I answered that question.
Sure, Arnold. So there's a very interesting question. It's mostly on a broader, not very specific to sales. It's like during a career transition, is it good to be in one specific industry or should we change our industry?
That's a very good question, right? Like from personal experience, what I've seen is it is important to work initially in one particular industry, understand the depths of the industry. There is this common adage saying, people generally are mile, wide and inch deep. I think you need to go a lot deeper when it comes to industry domain knowledge, because that's a key. And that is also the difference of being a generalist versus a specialist. So each individual looking at a sales career should try and ask this question to themselves, whether they want to be a specialist or a generalist,
Okay.
right? And accordingly work in that particular domain. So for me, it was like travel, transportation, logistics. I kind of created the depth in that industry. So I have over 15 years in that particular space.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean you cannot apply learnings or knowledge of a particular industry to another industry. So that cross pollination effect is very important. How people get it into other industries. And I've been able to do that in my career at least. I've been able to work with, let's say, retail, consumer goods, healthcare,
Okay.
manufacturing at the early part of my career. I've brought a lot of that knowledge into whichever industries I have gone, because I go with a problem solving mindset. I don't go with a mindset that, hey, I'm working in industry X or Y, right? I have a problem at hand. I have been in tech. A tech function is a horizontal function, is not necessarily a vertical function. And how do I bring the benefits of one industry to another? So that outside of industry cross pollination thinking is very important.
Understood. Understood, Arnold. So I think, yeah, so this was Gunjan's, sorry, yeah, this was Purnima's question. I hope, Purnima, we were able to answer this question. So I think due to positive time, we will take a pause on the questions. And there's a small segment, which is surprise rapid fire round, Arnold. So let's switch gears. Let's have a quick rapid fire, and you just have to say things that just instantly come to your mind. All right? No,
Okay.
no, not a lot of
I'll try
thinking.
my best.
So, what is that one word you would describe a great salesperson?
Consistent.
What is the deal breaker in a client conversation?
I think impatience.
Cold calls or warm intros? What do you prefer? Or which one do you
Warm
like?
intros. Warm
Warm
intros. Any day of the week, because I don't like these cold calls. I get harsh treatment sometimes.
Okay, this is an interesting one. One sales myth you strongly disagree with.
But deals have to be closed like tomorrow. It needs to go over a period of time. Like the deals have to get baked. I mean, if it has the
Yeah,
right ingredients, you end up with a right, recipe. So that's why I say, impatience, which I mentioned, is like a deal breaker. So for any deals to really be, won, I think it takes a little bit of time, some patience, the right ingredients of building trust, relationship. I think that all comes together then in the end into a very nice, final product.
got it. This was such a wonderful conversation, Arnold. Super honest and relevant. Thank you so much for sharing about your experiences so openly. And to everyone who joined, thank you so much for being here and for all your questions. Please feel free to reach out to Arnold in case you have any specific question. And sorry to the folks whose questions we could not take. I saw a few questions coming in my personal chat over here as well. So you can directly reach out to Arnold. We've already shared the profile link to his LinkedIn account. We will email it to you once again, and see you in the next one. I hope you learned a lot from this session, and hoping to see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnold.